I found Chapter 8 rather interesting as it centered around the concept of unbundling content and material based on individual preference, essentially being able to block out material that is not useful or of any interest to the user while being able to surround ourselves with information that is most useful and valuable in our minds. And so at the end of the chapter, the question that I think that was proposed, being really interesting and relevant to me, was whether or not the internet positively impacted society, or I think in more general terms, what impact does the internet essentially have on society and the shaping of society, and which is more likely to happen? Will the internet create a more bountiful culture that promotes greater harmony and understanding based on the fact that we as individuals live in a virtual community and that we're able to click our way around and decipher different information based on what we deem as valuable, and the fact that we get to collaborate with people outside of the physical constraints are also beneficial? Or could we be potentially clicking our way into a more fractured society, one that's more broken, that breaks down individuals into certain cliques and into certain virtual communities based on our alike ideas and our mind frames? And could this possibly threaten the structure of existing democracies? A couple of studies that were embedded in the book in Chapter 8 in 1971, the Schelling study, surrounded around residency patterns based on the race of the family and the preference and where they would like to live. In 2005, there were also two other studies, the Jolfson and Van Alstyne study, a mathematical study in 2005, the Colorado Springs political study, centered around liberals and conservatives, basically lumping them into like groups. And what was found, and even though each of these studies had different content, I think the main idea was that the more that people converse and share information with other people who hold similar views and values, the more extreme their views become. As was discovered in the 2005 Colorado Springs political party study, people who went in and were grouped with alike political parties may have went in with a set view or value on a political ideology, but they came out being exposed to people with like-mindedness with even more extreme views than they had going in. And so ultimately, ideological amplification is likely to be very pervasive or persistent online. Certain filtering tools and personalization technologies are likely to magnify the effect for the fact that we are able to go in and the internet is able to click us in and expose us to information that it deems as appropriate to us based on our history and the patterns and the materials that we read. And so, according to Carr on page 165 of Chapter 8, individuals empowered to screen out material that does not conform to their existing preferences may form virtual cliques, insulate themselves from opposing points of view, and reinforce their biases. So ultimately, is it creating that homogeneous effect, that effect of collaboration and being more open-mindedness, or is the internet ultimately sheltering us from different views that are unlike ourselves and kind of having the opposite effect? The reference, of course, is the book itself, but I'm going to take you back to that question, which is more likely to happen. And I think this was really interesting to me, as we all think the internet is one, and of course it is, that we are able to really expose ourselves to a variety of different ideas and philosophies, but based on our ability to kind of click and unbundle and look through information that we like, are we essentially filtering out some of those other ideas that give us that more open-mindedness and a greater understanding of something that's of a different value to one of our own? And so could this be potentially more hazardous than it is good? And I think that really proposed an interesting question and one that I've never really thought about before. And so I thought Chapter 8, the unbundling, or the great unbundling effect, was rather interesting. And based on some of these studies that we had looked and read into, it makes a lot of sense. And so I thought that was one particular component of Chapter 8 that had me really thinking.